Hello and welcome to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. I am Bill Oram, sports columnist at the Oregonian, joined as always by a glitter bomb of a personality, Brenna Greene from Coin 6. Brenna, how are we today?
A little tired. Went up to Seattle to go visit Cameron Brink last night, but we got it done. So, yeah, we're trucking along. For those of you who are listening, we are repping the lovely Great Falls Argonauts today on this podcast, which you probably have never heard of. But
they're not. It's not Great Falls University anymore, or the University of Great Falls anymore. It's Vanguard or something.
No, it's
like
Providence.
Providence. I was close. Okay, not
Providence.
Close at all, but
these are the old colors before they switched to the blue and green colors to once again represent Providence. Yes, that Providence, the health system you know of. Because for whatever reason, they randomly own a university in Great Falls, Montana. Bizarre. But anyway, so we're repping the old school Argos today. I was like, I was trying to figure out what I was gonna wear, and I was like, that just feels right today for whatever reason. So there you go. How are you?
I'm good. Interested in seeing your report on Olympian Cameron Brink. She'll be on the 3-on-3 team in Paris. But I do want to start, Brenna, with a quick remembrance, and I feel like we've had to do this too frequently over the last couple of weeks, but of the great Jerry West. Obviously, the logo of the NBA, Zeke from Cripple Creek, and Cabin Creek. Cripple Creek is a song. Zeke from Cabin Creek, Mr. Clutch, and obviously Jerry West is not an Oregonian story or an Oregon sports story, save for the fact that he touched literally every corner of the basketball world.
Yes.
And that meant a lot of times, particularly playing in the Pacific Division, coaching in the Pacific Division, and then running a team in the Pacific Division for 20 plus years, that there was a lot of crossover between Jerry West and the Portland Trail Blazers. And just a couple of highlights I just wanted to throw out as we remember Jerry West today after he has passed away at 86 years old. Jerry West was the coach of the Lakers in 1976-77 when the Lakers led the league in regular season wins with 53. And of course, that is the year that the Lakers ran into the mighty Portland Trail Blazers in the I guess what we consider the Western Conference Finals. The Blazers swept the Lakers in that series. And I was looking back today, what Jerry West said about the Blazers in 1977 after the sweep was they're very blessed with great personnel, and they're going to be very good for a long time. And, obviously, history did not end up going that way, thanks largely to the unfortunate health of Bill Walton, who we also lost a couple of weeks ago. Jerry West also built the Showtime Lakers as well as the Shaq-Kobe Lakers. When I covered the Lakers over the last decade, Brenna, I actually ended up talking to Jerry West a lot about kind of reflecting on a lot of those teams and how those things came to be, because Shaq went into the Hall of Fame, called Jerry West. Elgin Baylor was getting a statue, called Jerry West. The Lakers were setting a team record for the fewest wins in team history, called Jerry West, who retired actually at the start of that 1974-75 season when they won, I believe, 33 games. And that was part of the reason they were bad, was that Jerry retired in the preseason, but he retired after a preseason game against the Portland Trail Blazers at the Forum. But I think the biggest sticking point, if you are a Blazers fan, and where Jerry West has probably aggravated you the most, and like that was one of his, that's his gift. He was one of the great competitors and winners. He lived to win. And one time when he did that at probably the greatest expense to the Trailblazers, I think we could agree, was 2000. He was the vice president of basketball operations for the Lakers. He built that 99-2000 team. He didn't just build that team. He, in the summer of 1996, was able to woo Shaquille O'Neal in free agency and then drafted Kobe Bryant. And one thing that is out there, or that he had told me, and I'm sure others, the summer of 96, Jerry West had to be hospitalized and treated for exhaustion because of how much pressure he was under in the summer of 96. But so the intensity, just the biggest thing. So one of the all-time workers and winners in the history of the NBA. and one more for you, and then I'll throw it to you. A few years ago, on the 20th anniversary, I guess it was 2020, Jason Quick, former Oregonian Blazers writer, now at The Athletic, and I, former Athletic reporter, now at The Oregonian, worked on a piece where we did a bit like an oral history of the 2000 Western Conference Finals Game 7. It's called 12 Minutes in June. I reread it today. It was fun as hell to work on and fun to read again. But the way that 2000 Lakers team came together and the way that it ended up beating the Blazers, one of the biggest takeaways from rereading that was the fact that it was Brian Shaw, right? I'm sure plenty of people remember this. Brian Shaw came up so big in the fourth quarter of that run when the Lakers came back from 15 down. Brian Shaw hit a banked-in three at the end of the third quarter, and then two more threes, I believe, at the start of the fourth. Well, the irony of all that is that Brian Shaw was only on the Lakers because the Blazers had, in effect, released him. He was on the team with the Blazers in '99 during the lockout season. Did not play hardly at all. In fact, I don't really recall if he played at all. Then he was basically out of the league, and Mark Warkentine, who was the Blazers' assistant GM at the time, called Brian Shaw and said, "Hey, I've got a deal for you that you can't pass up. It's too good to pass up. We're going to make a 6-for-1 trade to the Rockets for Scottie Pippen, but we need a sixth player to make the contracts work. I need to sign you to a $1 million contract, and you don't have to do anything." So Brian Shaw signed a $1 million contract with the Blazers to get traded to Houston and waived by the Rockets. And that sort of got the wheels in motion of the Lakers looking at like, hey, Brian Shaw's available, veteran big guard. Phil Jackson loved big guards, ball handling guard. And so the Lakers went for it. And obviously they couldn't have anticipated what a huge role he was going to end up playing on that three-peat team, and particularly in Game 7 against the Blazers. But it kind of haunted the Blazers that this guy they had let go had been scooped up by the team that ended up beating them. And as Mitch Kupchak, former GM of the Lakers, told me in that story, 12 Minutes to June, which you can find on The Athletic, was another brilliant Jerry West move. So if you are still hurting over the 2000 Western Conference Finals, you can thank Jerry West today for that. So, Brenna, when you think of Jerry West, do you believe his impact was greatest as a player? Many-time All-Star, won championship, I believe lost in the finals 7 times. Mr. Clutch, the only player to win a finals MVP on the losing side in '69, finally got a championship in 1972. As a coach, only did that for a few years, but very successful at that as well. Or as an executive?
I think you have to go executive just because of the amount of different franchises he was involved in as well. I mean, he was, he was advisor for several different franchises. I believe both the Warriors and the Clippers at different points. Obviously, that Lakers run is insane. I mean, I've seen a lot of things online today where it's been like in the same week, he traded Vlade Divac for Kobe Bryant and then signed Shaquille O'Neal. Like, is there a better week for a GM maybe ever? And it's pretty good week, pretty good decision making going on there. So yeah, I mean, and I also realize that I'm coming at this through my own colored lens due to the fact how long I have been alive on this earth. So it's not like I watched Jerry West as a player.
Sure.
So I understand that I don't have maybe as much of the historical context as others would, but it's just crazy for me to think that like less than a year ago, like he was sitting courtside at Summer League doing his thing. No problem. Was the kind of the center of attention. I said on Twitter, like he kind of had this aura about him where it's like it was this understated importance where it wasn't like an ego thing with him when he walked into a building where I was like, oh, I'm a big deal. But it was more just like he walked into the building and you're like, I know that person's a big deal. Like I can just tell. And it wasn't like a thing that he was projecting. It was just who he was. So yeah, it took my brain like a few, like, I remember when he walked in, it's just one of those things, like, my brain wasn't connecting up to who it was. And I was like, I kind of turned to Sean Hyken and I was like, who is that? And he's like, that's Jerry West. And I was like, yes, like, yep, that's the guy. So yeah, and Jerry West, by the way, ever since has been my hitter photo on Twitter. So there you go.
Probably his greatest achievement.
It honestly, yeah.
It's up there.
It's up there. Because, of course, they were, like, taking solo shots of him on the broadcast and talking about Jerry West being in the building, and I was sitting right behind him. So, I'm getting text messages like, you're on TV! Like, yeah, it's the closest I'm ever going to get to this guy. And I was right. I was definitely right. Yeah. So, yeah, just a loss for basketball fans. But I have to say, as an executive, he just did so much, and he did so much for so many different teams around the league. So
what you're talking about, and I think it's so important, is the gravitas and sort of weight of Jerry West's involvement in anything. Yeah. He helped build, after he left the Lakers, and people thought he was probably done in basketball, or at least as a GM basketball operations figure. He went and built the Grizzlies, including drafting Pau Gasol. Yep. He then again retired, ultimately served in an advisory role with the Golden State Warriors, played a huge role in them signing Kevin Durant and getting those 2 championships from having KD. Kevin Durant has said that Jerry West's presence was a huge part in his decision. So however many championships he came away with from that involvement with the Warriors. And then somewhat tragically, I will say, and again, this is from somebody who spent a lot of time covering the Lakers and imploring the Lakers to rehire Jerry West. I spent a lot of time writing and arguing that the Lakers needed to make things right with Jerry, because there's a lot of acrimony over how things ended, and it felt like the right thing to do for the game of basketball, and would have also been good for the Lakers. In 2017, the Lakers overhauled their basketball operations and handed the keys over to Magic Johnson. And what Jeannie Buss said at the time was that she, had not, considered rehiring Jerry West because he was still under contract with the Warriors, which is a bunch of hogwash. Of course, you could have, you could have done that.
Contracts don't exist in the NBA.
And the truth is that there's still a lot of hurt feelings over the way, the way Jerry had left, and Jerry had a lot of feelings about the conflicts created by Jeannie's relationship with Phil Jackson. So there's all sorts of reasons that that those sides never reconciled. But I think it's a great loss. One thing that I was told at the time was Jerry wanted to come back. And in fact, he wanted to come back more than anything to the Lakers. And I think that would have been great to see as his swan song in some capacity. But instead, he's with the Clippers, ends up playing a big role in them, bringing in Kawhi Leonard. So huge gravitational pull. The other thing I want to say about Jerry West is that we don't just lose his presence as a basketball figure on its own, and what he represented in the game of basketball. We're also losing one of the great historians of the game and a lot of the institutional memory of the league. And what you have seen in recent years, because Jerry did touch so many corners of the game, and because he, played against Bill Russell, he played with Elgin Baylor, he played against, when Red Auerbach was coaching, he was involved in every decade of the league from 1960 on to literally yesterday. And so he became a go-to resource and narrator, I think, of a lot of the league's earlier days. So, at any, I hate to, but funeral, major league event, Jerry West was, one of the most, was one of the people who would be speaking, who you would see, who would tell the stories of why people today need to appreciate Elgin Baylor more. And I think that that is a great loss because, and of course, inevitable, right? Time marches on, but I do remember having a moment when I was writing about Elgin Baylor and talking to Jerry, and I wondered who, if not Jerry West, would tell these stories. And now that is gone too. And so I am mindful of that loss today as well. Yep. Okay.
Summed it up perfectly.
We're going to look a little more local. Thank you for indulging me. But over the weekend, Brenna, in a different world, you and I might be packing our bags right now for the bright lights of Omaha, Nebraska. And it did not work out that way for the Oregon Ducks and Oregon State Beavers baseball teams. We've talked about their respective runs on the podcast in past weeks. Rough showing, I would say, in the Super Regional for both teams. Oregon had big leads in 2 games at Texas A&M and ended up getting, essentially blown out in both of them. Oregon State, one of the most productive offenses in the entire country, the most productive offense in school history, got 3 hits in 18 innings against Kentucky. They both lose. There are different threads to pull at here, but let me first ask, which fan base should be more disappointed this week that they're not going to Omaha?
I gotta go Oregon State. I mean, I think the fact that they came into that all year, they're in the top 10, so they're an underseeded 15.
Yeah.
They're going into an environment that, yes, is intense, but it isn't. Look, Texas A&M for baseball, that was going to be a rough climb for Oregon, no matter what. That is a tough place to go play baseball in.
Right.
And, yeah, then you have a situation where Oregon wasn't even hosting a regional round. So the fact that they got to the super regional round was impressive in itself, and went into UC Santa Barbara and beat a team that I believe hadn't been beaten at home that year.
Mm-hmm.
So that was impressive in itself.
Is that true? I don't even know if that's true, but I know it was an impressive. It was an impressive win.
I can fact check myself.
Let's not let facts get in the way here. Keep going.
Yes.
It might be true.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I have to go and well, the first game Oregon State. I mean, the first game Oregon State wasn't really. They were in it for a few innings, but I mean, they had a shot in that second game. They could have won that second game and forced a game 3. Oregon, once they got to those final innings in both those games, it was over.
Yeah.
So, and you just never know if you're an Oregon State fan or what things are going to look like in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, this is like our last shot with this iteration of what Beavers of what our school looks like. So yeah, I think it has to be them. But to be fair, I'll say it. We at our sports department talked about, the upcoming super regionals.
Mm-hmm.
My producer thought both of them were going to win. Adam Bjornson thought one of them was going to win, and I said they're both not winning.
I think I kind of got swept up in the idea that at least one of them was going to win, just because, hey, there's better odds. You got 2 of them in there. But I really don't think, you're talking about the number 2 and 3 teams in the country.
Exactly.
And, Texas A&M was really freaking good. Kentucky has never been to the College World Series before. That changes this weekend. But Kentucky, shut down an incredible Oregon State offense. My case for Oregon would just be that, well, there's a few things. Oregon hasn't been to a College World Series since 1954, which, is somewhat enhanced by the fact that there wasn't a program for 30 years. But, for people who are drawn to the historical component of stuff, I am.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, getting that, breaking that curse, I think, kind of hangs over the Ducks. Also, Oregon is playing the best baseball over this stretch, really, in school history. And you're talking about 4 straight regionals and two straight super regionals. Last year, they were 2 outs away from the College World Series. That was the year that they should have gone, right? You can't just assume that you're going to get another opportunity. That Oregon team was good enough.
At home against Oral Roberts, yeah.
Right. But because last year was so painful, I think that you then get to this year where it's like, hey, didn't come through the Pac-12 tournament the same way, but you go and win a regional on the road, which is just very difficult to do. They were the 3rd seed in the Santa Barbara regional and kind of dominated it. they had the extra innings win against San Diego in the first game, but otherwise kind of came through that unscathed. As we talked about last week, got a complete game.
It was close at the end of both those Santa Barbara games.
But you get a complete game from Kevin Sider in the third game. I mean, you're feeling pretty good. Anyhow.
Yep.
And then I think the other thing that is frustrating for Oregon fans or causes extra pain is the fact that you had big leads and your bullpen couldn't hold A&M at bay. And particularly that second game, you're up 8-4 in the seventh inning. You're looking pretty good, and you give up 9 runs on 2 hits, 7 walks, a hit batter, and 2 hits, including a grand slam. And there's been some discussion and like certainly social media, which is not real life, but also beyond on kind of the management of the bullpen and Mark Wasikowski leaving Brock Moore in there for additional batters. And I'd have to look back at how many I think he walked in 2. Where I feel for Waz here, and with hindsight, get him out of there sooner, get a different look. Everybody's short on arms this time of year. You have to manage a little bit, at least for Monday. Who are you going to have available to pitch on Monday?
Yeah.
Obviously you have to get to Monday, but 2, Brock Moore has been their best reliever along with Logan Mercado for a long time. And he had gotten 6 straight outs. He had induced 2 double play balls already in the previous innings. It just seemed like you had the right guy on the mound, even though he wasn't hitting the strike zone. So I just think it's one of those things where it didn't work out, and that's baseball. But I understand that it's another bullpen meltdown. Oh my God. We've seen this before. But I don't know. I think ultimately it's more disappointing that Oregon State's not in the College World Series because they were the better team. Oregon should view this year as a success because it had no business being in the Super Regionals again this year.
They graduated so many people from last year's team. Yeah.
So, I mean, really great seasons for both teams. Oregon State should be more disappointed about how it closed out the regular season and the Pac-12 tournament and putting itself in a position where it had to go onto the road to someplace like Kentucky. Before that last inning against Arizona at the end of the regular season, Oregon State was in tremendous position to host a super regional and to be one of those top 8 national seeds, and they let that go. That's what they should be disappointed about.
By the way, I was right on the UC Santa Barbara thing.
They hadn't lost at home?
Just for the record, they had not lost at home before Oregon beat them down
twice.
There, so.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't. Yep. That particular detail had escaped me, so that's a good piece of information.
I had to make sure that I was correct because it says 27-2 on the record, for the home record. But then I was like, well, are they counting that regional or not? Just never know. It's it's a postseason event. Yeah. But yeah, so I went through the schedule. I did my due diligence. So there you go. But yeah, I just they let a lot of things. Oregon State left a lot to be desired out there on the baseball field, to say the least, this season.
Well,
and
Oregon State had a play. They lose 3-2, right? And they have a play where the go-ahead run is a pass ball, and your pitcher doesn't cover home. Yeah. Now, granted, the runner's on second base, and it was Keljo who was pitching, right? So I think he's thinking. Keljo. I'm sure he's thinking pass ball, runner advances, and isn't thinking scores from second. But the ball was not the ball was gone.
It was at the backstop.
It was far, and so I guess if I tried to imagine what Keljo must have been thinking in that moment, it's that the runner's going to advance and not score. Still got to cover home. That was a really unfortunate mental error from Oregon State, which just should be better than that at this point. But there was other weird stuff. You had Bazana finally get a hit in the 9th inning, runs into the first baseman, and they don't really ever address why he wasn't awarded second base on that. Should they have had the runner on first steal, so he would have been in scoring position when Bazana was up? But then how does that affect how they pitch Bazana? There's all sorts of stuff, but the bottom line is that Oregon State was not good enough against Kentucky to deserve to advance, and that's where it ended up.
And now we go into the summer where things are going to be much, much different come next school year.
Well, and just to your point, about the Beavers, as far as I know, we have not seen anything. I'm just double checking, make sure I haven't missed anything. There's been no news on the transfer portal, and
No,
there
not yet.
are, and I believe that's open today for baseball, where you can start seeing it. But like, I think it's just going to be interesting to see what dominoes, if any, fall. If Gavin Turley stays at Oregon State, that bodes extremely well for the future of the program. If Caraway stays at Oregon State, those are the guys you want to make sure like stick around. And so I'm sure Mitch Canham and the Damnation Collective and all that have been working overtime to make sure baseball doesn't suffer the same fate as the other programs. But I don't think anybody can say with certainty that it won't befall the baseball program, just because it has been the story of the year for every team at Oregon State.
Yeah, it's just the scar is too deep at this point. You can't have at least some sort of hesitancy about the situation. So
right,
we shall see what happens with that. So, but like you said, and the other thing is too, like, we've heard nothing. And yes, I don't know what day the transfer portal opens for baseball. That's not top of mind with all the things that I gotta keep up in this noggin. But people all the time, in college basketball, college football, say I'm going to enter the transfer portal before the transfer portal opens. So the fact that we haven't seen anything about that either is encouraging.
Yeah, I think with basketball, it took a couple of weeks where it's like, we were watching Jordan Pope and Tyler Bilodeau, like, are they going to stay? Like, can they possibly keep them? And it felt like that initial wave of like, oh, maybe they haven't entered the portal yet. And then everybody leaves. So who knows? We're all on pins and needles, such as it were. Speaking of pins and needles.
Oh, boy.
Let's talk about the Blazers offseason.
Okay, all right.
So we've talked previously on previous episodes that listeners can go back and find if they don't have those top of mind, about the Blazers needing to make some moves to get under the luxury tax. This team is not good enough to be paying so much in tax. A lot of candidates to trade, big dollar guys, if you wanted to come off of DeAndre Ayton, Jeremy Grant, Malcolm Brogdon. Those are things that the Blazers could explore as they continue to build a young core around Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe, and whoever the Blazers bring in the draft, which I want to talk about before we run out of time. But Bobby Marks, who has turned being a former GM into a lucrative media career with ESPN, proposed. He did it actually a really, I thought was a really instructive breakdown of basically every team's offseason, kind of breaking down what they have under contract and what their draft situation is and who their free agents are, but also a trade he would like to see for each team. And the trade that Bobby Marks proposed for the Blazers is Anthony Simons to Orlando for Cole Anthony, as well as the 2025 Denver first round pick and the 2025 Orlando first round pick. How does that strike you?
Yeah, I think it's just Blazers have a logjam at guard, and something's got to give. And it's, as much as Anthony is great, and we both know that. Like, if I'm him, it's probably now time for me to exit as well. Like, he doesn't want to stay on it. He doesn't want to stay on a team like this in his prime years, and have to figure out, the meshing of the guard, if you will. I think that I do think that the Blazers just need to go all in on Shaedon and Scoot and kind of stop. They've been playing a game for the last year and change where they have had one foot in one world and one foot in another world. And at some point, you got to make a decision in terms of what you want to do. And if you don't make a decision in terms of what you want to do, you're going to end up with a similar situation as Damian. And obviously, Anthony does not have the importance to this area as Damian did. But you're going to end up in a similar situation where Anthony's going to end up having to go to the franchise and say, I can't keep doing this half in, half out thing. I gotta go somewhere, you know? And Orlando needs shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a homecoming for Anthony. It makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, I think that would be a great landing spot for him and something that would work out with the Blazers in terms of the salary situation. So yeah, I mean, I would be. I don't know if I'd be super surprised if Anthony is still on this team come October, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if he was not. Because they just got to make a commitment. They got to figure it out. They got to choose one way or the other. And it's pretty obvious to me what way they should choose. So
yeah, I don't even think that they're in like the choose a direction mode anymore. I think it's they've chosen their direction, and it's more kind of taking it across the finish line.
Yeah,
and
I can agree with that.
And so, I mean, look, Malcolm Brogdon is going to get traded this summer. That is a foregone conclusion. And
we appreciate your service, Malcolm.
And so it becomes, who's going to offer the most draft compensation and the least, money that's going to tie you up long term. I think, I'm really interested to see if the Lakers get involved there, but that's for another time. Anthony Simons is just in a weird spot. Like he's young enough that he fits the Blazers timeline, sort of, right? Yep. Like he's 25 years old. Yep. But he's 2 years away from what will be his third contract. He's going to be owed a massive payday, just as Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson, in theory, should be coming into their own. Yep. And his contract's not bad. It's like 20. I should pull it up, but $25 million in the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. Which, as everything is going up, the media rights deal is going to kick in, salary cap's going to go up, is really a great value for a guy who's as good as Anthony Simons is. So I think his contract I think he has a lot of value as a player, and his contract is also very appealing. And so then it just becomes, to me, what's the best offer? And if you're talking about 2 firsts, the 2025 draft is really strong. There's a lot there. The Blazers are going to have their own pick in 2025, which should be pretty high. And then you add in, 2 picks that are going to be probably in teens and 20s, probably the 20s in Orlando and Denver. Both of those are playoff teams. But I would be thinking long and hard about something that gets me to 3 first-round picks in 2025. Like take Cole Anthony out of it. Cole Anthony is not the piece that matters there.
Could we just sub in Jalen Suggs to make me happy?
I don't think they want to do that for Jalen Suggs in the same way they would for Cole Anthony. But sure, if it's going to get you on board with the deal. But okay, so I think we both think that sort of deal makes sense, whether it's Orlando or someone else. But multiple draft picks for Anthony Simons, who doesn't really make sense for where you are, frankly, and is not. And the problem with Ant is he's good, he's really good, but he's not good enough to build. He's not your franchise cornerstone. You're still looking for that guy. And that's why those draft picks become so valuable, because it is a little bit of, opening Christmas presents. You don't know what's beneath the wrapper, but you need to find out. And so that's what makes the draft so valuable for teams like Portland. And I don't see a path forward for them trying to build any other way. They don't have the foundation where they can start adding veteran pieces to win now. Like Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, and DeAndre Ayton can all help teams that have that. They can all be win now players elsewhere, but together they don't make up that kind of team in Portland. And Portland is on a different path with these young guys. They have 2 lottery picks in the draft in a couple of weeks, which we're going to talk about in a second. But Anthony Simons doesn't make sense for them anymore. He has said that winning and being in the playoffs is his top priority. He doesn't have any leverage to go demand a trade or to declare where he wants to go. But I also do think that putting him in a situation in Orlando, which you said would be a homecoming for him, an Orlando team that is young and exciting and on the come up, would be a great way of taking care of him too, because he's given a lot to this franchise and has been a joy to watch grow and develop.
I think another thing that is appealing about Anthony for other teams that is actually not appealing about Anthony for other players, or for the Blazers, not for players, for the Blazers, is that he can play both point guard and shooting guard. So he offers that flexibility. But for the Blazers, it actually makes things more confusing because nobody's like knows for sure where to put him. And so it's not like it's a straight up like, okay, it's either going to be Anthony or Shaedon, or it's going to be Anthony or Scoot. There's no like or going on there because nobody knows where he kind of fits there. And so I think that is something that for the Blazers, in terms of seeking clarity, makes things more confusing, actually. Whereas for another team, they're like, oh, I got a guy who can, play two, but if I need him to move over to the one and run the offense for a little bit, he can do that. That's awesome. So I that's another layer to the clarity situation that the Blazers need to have that actually makes it more murky. But like I said, that's on 80% of the teams in the league, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, like positionally, he's in the way. And that doesn't even mean that the Blazers couldn't draft another guard in the upcoming draft. Like, I don't think it's ideal, but I don't think it's that you couldn't. Like, if you decide you want Nikola Topic, and he's a 6'9" guard, like, fine, you put him out there with Shaedon and Scoot, and it's sort of like the best man wins, then we're going to trade the other one. But, like, and that's what you saw with the Kings, with Halliburton and Fox. Like, you can do that because they're all kind of at the same stage of their careers. Ant is just on a different level. So, like, when all is said and done, he may not be as good of a player as Shaedon or Scoot. Like, he actually might be the best of the three. But, like, let's say he doesn't. But he commands more time and opportunity on the court right now because he's a better player right now. And the Blazers don't need a guard who is that much further along in his development than where Scoot and Shaedon is for where they are. So, I just think that is a... I don't want to say a no-brainer because you don't want to give them away, but I really think that's what the Blazers need to be exploring this offseason. But to the draft, I think that there are a lot of interesting elements to this draft. The Blazers have the number 7 and 14 pick, very disappointing lottery for a team that thought it was going to be in the top 4. This draft is all over the place. Like, I couldn't sit here and say, here are the 3 players that I think the Blazers could draft. Do you? Why?
Yeah. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to go into a draft and just be like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. And neither you or I really need to sit here and, like, have a take on what needs to happen because it is so all over the place. So I think it's going to be actually, like, kind of a fun draft night to see how it all plays out. I think it might be a little chaotic, which, I'm down for a little chaos. Let's go. So I don't know. I think it's kind of fun, but that's my own little 2 cents. Seems that you do not agree.
I don't mind the chaos. I like chaos, and I like that there's options, and I also think that the uncertainty leads to, and I think I've said this before, gives the Blazers a better chance to actually find a guy at 7 or 14 because teams at 1 through 6 and 7 through 13 or 8 through 13, they're not totally sure either. So it becomes a little bit more of a crapshoot. I'm also, so it seems like Zachary Richichet and Alex Sarr are going to go in the top 2, and then after that, like, there's just a lot of disagreement over, whether it's Donovan Clingan, Reed Shepherd, Dalton Knecht, Ron Holland from the G League. There's just kind of talent all over the place. It kind of becomes a little bit of what you want. The Blazers again have 7 and 14. Is it a draft where it makes more sense to say, hey, because nobody really knows and there aren't clear-cut tiers among these players, that it makes more sense for us to take 2 swings at it with 7 and 14? Or, does it help a team like the Blazers that still needs guys, right? Like, still needs to find, like, its core player or core players to say, we're going to package 7 and 14 and see if we can engage with, I think Houston's at 3, right? Like get up to 3 or get up to 4. You know, and maybe you get a player back as well to move up a few spots to have a better shot at a guy you want in the draft. I don't know. It probably just depends on who's there and who you actually want, because I could probably argue it both ways. Do you have a feel for like what the Blazers might do, or like knowing how they've operated in the past of like what you think they'll do?
Yeah. I mean, historically, they haven't been super active on draft night in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they probably attempted it last year, but you know, they couldn't get what they needed back in that return.
Right.
So yeah, they haven't been super active in terms of that, which would lead me more so to believe that they would ultimately not do that. And also, I just wonder if they can get a good ROI with those two picks, because as we've talked about, this draft is such a bizarre one that those picks become even less valuable because everybody views this draft as weaker. I personally do not see a team that is at 3 or 4 being like, oh yeah, those 2 picks, we'll take those and trade back. Just because of the fact that like that's this draft, like in a nutshell. That sound is like this shit's like, what is going on here?
I just think that the counter to that, I guess here's my point. I have multiple thoughts on this. A guy you like, a guy you think is the number 1 player in the draft could conceivably, be available at 8, or a guy that you're hoping to get at 8 could go 3. Like the Athletics mock draft has Donovan Clingan from UConn as, going to the Blazers at 7. And, ESPN, Jonathan Givony from Draft Express on ESPN says that Donovan Clingan would be the right pick for Atlanta at 1. I don't think anybody thinks that that's where he's actually going to go, but he could go as high as 3. And so does it make sense to drop down because the talent pool is flatter, or does it make it even that much more important that you're at the top so you can get the guy you want, because who knows where he's actually going to go off the board?
By the way, big Donovan Clingan fan. I'd be very happy if the Blazers drafted him. This is the same person who, when they went and watched Gonzaga play UConn in Seattle in December, and when he was announced during the starting lineup, I turned to all my friends and I go, that's the guy that's going to absolutely destroy us tonight. Get ready. And then he had I forget what the stat line was, but had an insane first half against them. Just murdered them. And I was like, yep, all right. I feel smart right now, even though it really doesn't take a scientist to it really doesn't take anybody with much of a inkling of basketball to realize that guy was going to absolutely destroy my alma mater, just when you look at heights. But yeah, I mean, I guess in one way, this feels like a draft where there's no really wrong moves.
Not until 3 years from now we'll know what the wrong moves were. Yeah. Yes.
So there's not going to be a lot of like Joe Cronin's not going to deal with a lot of. It's not going to be as tense on draft night as it was last year. Let's put it that way. That room is going to be. We're not going to be having to have a Zoom with a player that's drafted and asking them about another player on the team almost the entire time, which was, bizarre. And I felt for Scoot in that situation because he shouldn't have. You have to ask the questions, but it's like, this is his draft night. It should be about him, not Damian Lillard, but you can't help it. So I'm sure that there's a lot of options there, but if I were to bet right now, I would say that the Blazers don't end up moving.
Okay.
That's not on any intel. That's just based off of history and based off of the fact that I just think that the ROI in this draft is not going to be what they're looking for.
The Blazers also have picks. Sorry, I have to pull this up. 34 and
well, a lot of picks.
Where did the other one go?
Which they don't really need.
34 and 40. So I don't expect the Blazers to draft 4 players and bring 4 rookies into camp.
No,
I suppose they could, but I do think they probably consolidate somewhere in there. And I also think it's going to be interesting, and just because we've never had this before, where the draft is split over 2 days, which is just, the NBA
we
being
both,
the NBA. But
eye roll emoji.
Sure, I definitely dislike it. But what it does do by creating like this 18-hour gap, it gives teams a lot of time to have conversations about the second round and to make moves. Like if a guy you liked in the first round is still available, with the 31st pick, is somebody, or let's say you think a guy is going to be available at the 34th pick, that gives you time to prepare an offer to get to 34 from the Blazers and go get the guy you want. So I think there's a lot of more potential for movement in the second round, especially at the top of the second round in this draft than we've seen before, because front offices are going to have, a night and a day to come up with a plan. So that's something to watch too, with the Blazers having 2 of the first 10 picks in the second round.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting draft this year, at the very least. That's all I know.
I think it will be one of those where we, I just can't really think of a draft that was this wide open since the 2013 draft when Anthony Bennett went first overall. The Blazers drafted CJ 10th. Trey Burke went to Utah 9th. Giannis went 15th, and Rudy Gobert went 27th. So, you can find guys. I don't know if you're going to find 2-time MVPs and 4-time Defensive Players of the Year and whatever else, but you can certainly find guys, and that's the Blazers' mission. And I'm really interested to see, because the Blazers have really beefed up their scouting department since Joe Cronin took over. They've hired a lot of people. Mike Schmitz is there now as the assistant GM. A former draft guru with ESPN. This is sort of his moment to shine. And again, we won't be able to judge it until years down the road, but I don't know. I'm oddly excited about this draft because I think there is potential for guys to slip through the cracks.
Yeah, and we won't know if that excitement was worth it until a few years from now. But at the very least, it's gonna be an adventure over those 2 days. I know that.
Brenna, I went to the office yesterday, the Oregonian newsroom at First and Clay in downtown Portland, and I checked my mail, and I periodically get mail sent to me in the newsroom.
This is the Life of Bill Oram segment now, by the way.
If we want to call it that,
Life
I
of
suppose
Bill,
that is fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I got mail. I had a letter from someone telling me I was too young to understand the impact of Bill Walton. And then I had a small tube that was delivered to me, probably about 6 inches. And I thought, this is a strange poster. I also worried about it being some kind of poison. When I opened it, Brenna Greene, it was a spring-loaded glitter bomb from a website that, among other things, sends people poop and silly, stinky glitter poop. So I guess, all things considered, it could have been worse.
Yes.
But it cost $19.99 to send someone a glitter bomb. I don't think this was meant as a positive thing. Am I wrong?
I don't think so, but did you, it said, did you check for a message? Because wasn't there a thing on there where it's like, if you go to this website, there may be a message for you as well?
I hate to address this because it is going, if the person who sent me the glitter bomb happens to be a listener of this podcast, but then again, this person sent me a glitter bomb. They're not listening to my podcast. Also, my apologies to the cleaning crew that hits the Oregonian newsroom from time to time. I had no way to clean up the glitter, so I will take this one, but I just it's there, so I apologize. I did go to the website, Brenna, and I discovered that a note was not left for me, and in fact, the website does not even offer that service. It was just a Rickroll.
Mm-hmm.
I got Rickrolled. I got glitter bombed and Rickrolled. Although I will say, I was in the newsroom, and I was sharing this experience with Julia Silverman, our excellent education reporter, and I was telling her about it because sometimes she enjoys giving dramatic readings of my fan mail in the middle of the newsroom. And I was sharing all this with Julia, and she's like, well, let's go to the website, whatever it is, /revenge. And then she clicks on it, and I immediately see Rick Astley's face. And I'm like, oh, it's a Rickroll. Ha, got me. And Julia hits play. I'm like, you don't need to hit play on the Rickroll. We know how the song goes. We've already been Rickrolled. I don't need to hear the song to reinforce that we've been Rickrolled. So double whammy yesterday in the Oregonian newsroom. But I do appreciate the engagement of listeners and readers who take the time to write us, who take the time to engage with what I'm writing in the Oregonian. So if that's responding with a tweet, if that is sending a letter, an old ink and paper, that's certainly appreciated. And if you are so moved that you want to send me a glitter bomb, well, I guess that means that you at least read it and you were moved
to pay
enough
$20
to respond. Just send me the $20 next time. I'll sprinkle some glitter on my head for you. I mean, it's cheaper than $20. I'll take the money. All right,
I wish there was video of you opening that glitter bomb.
I was more concerned about it
being
anthrax
something bad
or something. That I was caught off guard, I will say, in that moment. But well played to whoever my hater out there is. Well played.
Congrats on the haters.
And by the way, I will not stop whatever it is I'm doing that you hate so much. I will not stop doing it. So
I will not be deterred.
It did not work. Okay. Ooh, interesting word choice today.
Deterred?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. We're out here. We're out here giving you all the only child words that you learn growing up.
I hesitate to say why that's an interesting word because most of our listeners probably won't be listening to this on Wednesday, so I feel okay saying it, but I don't know if you play the same daily word puzzle that I do.
I haven't played that in a few months.
Oh, okay. Well, there is an Oregonian Wordle group, and I would like to tell you that I solved today's Wordle in 2.
Look at you.
I know.
I'm so proud.
I'm quite proud. I'm glowing. Okay. We've played all the hits. We've played them. We're playing ourselves out with all the hits. Brenna, thank you for your insights and time today. It is always appreciated. It's always lovely having you along. I think we'll be back next week. Well, are they going to have us back next week for another week?
I believe so. Yeah.
We haven't heard otherwise. So we'll be back next week with more stories from around the Oregon sports landscape and beyond, and how those stories intersect with the Oregon sports landscape. Brenna, has your Cam Brink piece package aired? Is that going to be available on the internet?
Don't think that will be out until Friday, I have a feeling. So
interested in seeing you catch up with the former prep star, Stanford star, number 2 pick in the WNBA draft, new star for the Los Angeles Sparks, and soon to be an Olympian. Pretty darn cool. Glad you made it up there to check in on her. We'll be looking for that. In the meantime, continue to read the Oregonian, OregonLive.com. Send mail, send letters, send packages to Coin 6 and Brenna Greene.
Yay! We have a clean
Bill Oram.
crew every night at Coin 6,
every night?
except for Fridays and Saturdays. So, try to make it so that I get it on when I'm in the office. I'm normally in the office Tuesday through Thursday when the cleaning crew is there. So just try to get it, make sure that I get it one of those days so that it can get cleaned up quickly.
I hope you're taking notes on this. Okay. With all that being said, I am Bill Oram. Thank you for listening to the Oregonian Sports Podcast. We'll be back next week. We hope.